Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Hump Day. I hope you're having a great reInvent, and by the time Wednesday got here, you have enough energy to keep going for another couple days. My name is Wayne Dusso, and I am a GM at AWS, responsible for a number of functional areas, and the one we're going to talk about today we refer to is Edge and Hybrid Services. So what we're going to talk about today is bringing AWS to you through cloud hybrid storage and rugged edge compute services. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity. Just a small side story. When I started at AWS, I was handed a service that was very nascent. It was only in the market for 2 months, and it was called AWS Storage Gateway. And here we are now, some 7 years later, and I still have the honor of having the gateway as part of my life every single day. And that's one of the services we're going to talk about today. We're also going to talk about Snowball Edge, which is our rugged edge compute device. And these services are used by tens of thousands of customers actively every single day. So if you are currently engaging one of these services, thank you very much. If you're thinking about engaging one of these services, you will follow in good company with all those folks that are doing it today. So my intention today is to ensure you leave here being familiar with Storage Gateway and with Snowball Edge, but mostly to be familiar with when to use these services. Right? So when do you employ Gateway, when do you employ Snowball Edge, and how do these fit into the larger context, which has been talked about by Andy on the big stage and maybe others. I haven't been paying attention to every keynote. But we'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes on how this fits into the continuum of deployment environments for AWS. Alrighty, so why do we do this? Well, we do it for you. Everything we do every single day emanates from something you did to inspire us, something you did to provide us with feedback, something you did to motivate us to produce solutions and services that are going to help you and your business and how you transform. And in the fullness of time, we believe that the vast majority of workloads, applications and workloads will run in the cloud. However, as you've told us, and I revealed a few seconds ago that I've been working on some of this for a while, that not everything can run in the cloud. Whether you're on your migration journey and not everything can move now, or whether there are certain applications, certain workloads that work best either on-prem due to latency requirements or maybe data governance requirements, or they need to work in environments that are just disconnected. They're not even connected to the cloud yet. You want to be able to develop the applications using AWS services or cloud technology, and you want to be able to run them in these environments as if they were running in the cloud. So my goal today is to have you understand what AWS can do for your business using our hybrid storage and our rugged edge services. So I would like you to walk away from today, if nothing else, then understanding a few of these takeaways, and then taking these and going into some of the other sessions we have that go much deeper into the services and technology than I will in this overview session. So what are the range of edge computing and on-prem storage services that we have today? How can you use Storage Gateway to solve your on-prem storage challenges that you may have? Most important to me is having people like yourself, customers, come up on stage and tell you how they're using these services to solve their business problems. So we have Bristol-Myers Squibb coming up, and we also have our own disaster response team coming up to tell you about how they use Snowball in disaster response situations, which, quite frankly, is an incredibly inspiring set of stories. And we'd like you to understand how to use Snowball Edge in your environments. And then I'd like to just do a quick overview of some of the things that we've launched over the course of 2019, or since we were here last year at reInvent. So every hour of every day of every year since I've been here at AWS has been a partnership with folks like yourself. You inspire ideas. You provide us with invaluable feedback when some of our ideas may not have gone exactly the way we expected them to. And I want to thank you for partnering with us. I want you to understand that it's valued and never taken for granted. So what we have here up on the screen is just a small sampling of customers that use AWS storage services. And they cover a vast range of industries and size of companies, government agencies, and so on. And here at reInvent, you get to hear firsthand from people who are up on the screen. Maybe you're up on the screen. And today we're going to have an opportunity to do that, as I mentioned a minute ago. So yesterday in the State of the Union session with Kevin Miller, Kevin introduced something we've been talking about within AWS for a little bit of time, and that's he introduced the three main motivators for why customers use AWS. And so we put this into a thought framework, which is, what does your transformation journey look like? Often people start out by transforming their IT infrastructure. They figure out how to move from on-prem into cloud. They figure out how to take their on-prem, say, storage capabilities, move them into AWS, and use something like AWS Storage Gateway to refresh their IT infrastructure. Once the infrastructure has been changed, has been made more efficient, easier, simpler, more cost-effective, the next thing we see customers doing is they start looking at their application architectures, and they start asking themselves questions like, how do I use containers? Can I really use serverless? That seems so much simpler. And they start going through this process. So this is sort of the second phase. And then once that agility has sort of gotten into your blood, then we start seeing customers really start thinking about how they transform their business with capabilities from AWS, whether in the cloud, on-prem, or at the edge. And this is some of the most exciting stuff we see every single day. Love talking to you guys about how you're transforming your business and doing more for your customers. So today, more and more applications are moving to the cloud, but not all of them can, and not all of them will. Some applications will remain on-premise for at least for now, and AWS has a range of services to accommodate these various needs. We often refer to the applications that reside on-prem as hybrid. That term is used in a number of ways, but it's a reasonable handle to use in conversation. And we also see a whole new set of workloads requiring increased capabilities on the edge. And that edge is being defined each and every day. Sometimes that edge is even a fully disconnected edge where there is no network, but yet you want to use the same services and programming models that you use on AWS today. And what we've heard more than anything from customers is please make it consistent. We don't want to, you don't want to, have to write applications that run differently in a region as you would on-prem or at the edge. That's very important to us as well. So to meet the edge and on-prem needs, AWS has built a whole series of services over the last handful of years to meet various needs. Starting on the left-hand side, we have a whole series of IoT, or Internet of Things, services that we've been building over the last couple of years. Everything from having free RTOS able to run on your very small devices or chips that securely connect the millions and billions of IoT devices to other IoT services and to AWS, without you having to, as developers, worry about how you build in security, how you build in connectivity. AWS Greengrass provides Lambda and container capability at the edge for those IoT devices to be able to communicate to us. So as they're streaming or passing byte streams into gateways, if you would, at the edge, Greengrass has the ability to do some processing on that, whether using Lambda or containers, and either pass that data to the region or provide input back to the device. Now, moving a little bit further in, often where we'll find green grass running in a disconnected environment is our snow family, or as we'll talk about today, our Snowball Edge service. And we'll talk in depth on that, so I won't go into a lot here, but Snowball Edge will provide a ruggedized edge computing capability that's really well suited for data collection, data processing, and if you want, data movement into AWS. So we see a lot of folks collecting data, processing it, making decisions in the field, and then at some point moving that data into AWS for larger analytic applications. Our storage gateway family has been in market for 7 years, and it is a primary service that we see customers engaging AWS with every single year. It is used for, usually starts with saying, well, I want to store my backups on AWS. And then that moves into, well, maybe I don't need as much primary storage in my environment, and I can start using gateway through NFS, SMB, iSCSI, one of those protocols to be able to have my storage on AWS, but my processing locally on-prem. And as we saw this week with Andy's talk, we have launched AWS Outposts, which is if you would, set of servers, set of AWS hardware that lives in your on-prem environments connected back to AWS, and it looks exactly like, because it is exactly like, EC2 hardware, AWS storage, living in your data centers in order to address latency concerns you might have or data residency concerns you might have. So these are the sort of the range of edge capabilities that we are presenting this week and available to you. And we're going to jump into that right now. So across a continuum of deployment environments, we have a range of services. And towards the left-hand side of this easygoing graph here, we really are looking at services that have tremendous scale, region-level scale, and all of the capabilities that AWS brings to bear. And as we move closer to the right-hand side, we still have those same AWS capabilities, but in some limited, constrained form, just based on the physics of the devices. But our intention is to make sure that that continuum of capability is the same and that we're meeting you where you need us to be. So when we look at the range of capabilities, we traditionally think about AWS regions. This week, on stage, Andy announced AWS Local Zones, which if you could look at as an AZ, an availability zone, that's not directly near one of our regions, but slightly further out than one of our normal availability zones. And we do this in order to bring AWS services as close to your on-prem environment as we can to lower the latencies. And this is really useful in areas such as, say, rendering. If you're in LA and you're in Hollywood and you're a movie studio and you want to be able to render on AWS, but you need that latency to be a lot closer. We talked about AWS Outposts and what we intend for that service. AWS Storage Gateway and Snowball we're going to talk about, and IoT services we just touched upon a minute ago. So today we're going to talk about AWS Storage Gateway and AWS Snowball Edge. So let's double back on this notion of transformation and look at ways we can use AWS Storage Gateway in your on-prem facilities, in your data centers, and your branch offices. So if you're not familiar with AWS Storage Gateway, think of it as a bridge. And this is a lovely bridge. It so happens to be literally outside my back door in Boston, Massachusetts. It's called the Zakim Bridge, and it was a $10 billion project that if you're a US citizen, you helped pay for, so thank you very much. It was only supposed to be $2 billion, so that's a whole nother story. So Storage Gateway seamlessly bridges on-prem applications to AWS storage services. Whether you have file, block, tape, AWS Storage Gateway has the ability to take those abstractions, present them on-prem to your applications, and they're all backed by AWS storage services. And we're going to have a customer come up a little bit later on and talk about how they use AWS Storage Gateway in their business. So the primary ways customers use this service to transform their applications, their infrastructure, their business, is generally in three categories. The first one is you can move your on-prem backup workloads to AWS using the gateway. And that can be done either over file, it can be done with block, it can be done with iSCSI virtual tape. The second thing is folks often will look at their sprawling set of storage servers or arrays on-prem, and they start to think about how they can move that into the cloud. And they will look at Storage Gateway as a means of presenting either NFS or SMB file shares to their applications. And lastly, and this is a really exciting one because this came directly from you. We did not create this idea ourselves. It was really out of many conversations with customers, and that's customers are building these data lakes in AWS, but they want to be able to take that content and process it, do some interesting things, and then distribute it out to branch offices in remote locations. And AWS Storage Gateway is an amazing service to be able to build those solutions. So why would you use AWS Storage Gateway for backup? To reduce your infrastructure costs, to eliminate the need to perform backup on-prem. This is a use case that customers have been using for the 7 years the service has been in existence, and it is an increasingly accelerating rate at which the service is used each and every day. And customers such as Analog Devices and Kellogg's have moved their on-prem tape, file, and database backups to AWS Cloud using the Storage Gateway, and they have done that at great scale. Now, whether you are, looking to maintain the same processes, the same software, the same education of your staff, whether you're looking to reduce, your infrastructure, the complexity, maybe just the risk of keeping on-prem backups in your location. And by moving your data onto AWS, you actually get a lot of the benefits that you would expect, including things like more security, greater availability, and quite frankly, vastly unlimited amounts of storage. So to solve your primary storage sprawl problems that some of you may have, customers are often employing the gateway as a replacement for primary storage, using either NFS or SMB shares. And in this particular configuration, it's super simple. You establish a gateway in your environment, you expose NFS or SMB endpoints to your applications, and then all of that data is stored reliably in S3, and there's a large local cache that lives in the gateway to provide your applications with local access speeds. So with this solution, same protocols you've always been using, your applications don't need to change, your user experience stays exactly the same. Much like the previous use case, you get to reduce your infrastructure, you get to reduce your cost and complexity, and your management efforts become much simpler as well because you're not managing that sprawl of devices. Right? And because of this, you can appreciate more scale, you can appreciate simpler management, and it's a tremendous solution for that particular problem. And this is what I mentioned a minute ago around enabling shared data sets anywhere in the world based on having a centralized data lake, the ability to ingest data into that data lake, the ability to process that data in a centralized fashion using Lambda or analytics, machine learning, any number of capabilities we have in AWS or applications that you would write yourself, and then being able to have that data automatically be populated around the globe, around the country, into local offices, in their gateways, in their caches, and your users have no idea that the vast amount of data that they're accessing is not local. So this is a really interesting use case, and we see groups like CME, which are known for Chicago Mercantile Exchange, use a centralized data lake where they process all their data, and then they use the storage gateways to move all this information out to their branch offices. And again, much like the other two use cases, this use case gives you, the ability to scale. You get a consistent use of your data lakes, consistent management and governance of your data, even though you're distributed to remote areas, and a lot of the benefits for the infrastructure that we talked about a few minutes ago. So with that, we've reviewed a little bit about what Storage Gateway can do. I'd like to bring somebody up on stage here in a second. Bristol-Myers Squibb is a leader in biopharmaceuticals whose mission is to discover, develop, and deliver medicines in areas covering cancer, and their work in drug discovery has helped save millions of lives. And to tell you more about this and what BMS is doing to transform their research and computing results for all of us, frankly, let's welcome BMS's Director of Research Computing, Harmon Sheikh.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon. So today I am going to talk a little bit about our hybrid cloud experience and the role AWS Gateway, Storage Gateway plays. A little bit about ourselves. We discover, develop, and deliver innovative medicines to our patients. We offer drugs in oncology, immunosciences, and fibrosis. So for us, it's all about data. Data is growing at exponential rate in our labs and also in clinical settings. Just over 3 years, we were talking about 100 terabytes a year to tens of petabytes a year, right? So growth rate is exponential and it keeps growing. So what drives this huge growth in the data set? So next-gen sequencing is, sequencing of your DNA, RNA, right? And the price of sequencing the gene exponentially fell down over the last 10 years, right? Which drove the use of sequencing a lot more and is now a central piece of how scientific biological data is understood. Scientific insights are understood, and it helps in innovating and discovering new drugs. So we have many different scientific data sets today in our hybrid cloud environment. The list keeps growing. Just on a technical note, raw data generated from the labs need to get to cloud for processing and analytics, right? And that is the function of Storage Gateway in our hybrid cloud workflow, right? We have been using virtual storage gateways for a few years now, but the advent of the hardware appliance, storage appliance, last year, since we have been complementing our different ways that we get the data to the cloud. Scratch space is a storage area in EC2 with high IOPS. Results data is, of course, shared internally and externally, so we use EFS. And there's a vast amount of external data that gets combined to get more insights. So why is the data complex? The data is complex because it is high velocity and high volume. Petabyte scale needs different services, different technologies to handle it, right? And on a technical side, there is also a limitation. Instruments are only NFS compliant, so we only have POSIX metadata. But when it reaches cloud, we keep it on object storage. We keep it on S3. S3 is our foundation for our data lakes as well as our processing, right? So we have to enrich the data. When we capture the data, we can only capture POSIX metadata, and scientific data, business data is kept in databases. When it reaches cloud, we need to enrich it before we analyze. So what is a complete solution on a hybrid cloud? It's not just moving the data. Once we get there, there are many hundreds of EC2 instances in burst computing mode that analyze the data. The data is kept in catalogs, technical data, and domain-specific business data sets. Graph databases are used to derive relationships between the data sets, and then it ends up in our data lake. So there is new to us is also machine learning and deep learning. Since last 2 years, we have been increasingly deploying machine learning to our data sets to understand it. Flow cytometry, if you are from life sciences, you are familiar with this. Genomics data sets, flow cytometric data sets, and image management is very unique to our industry and requires some custom algorithms. Right? So let me dwell a little bit on the pipeline and the use of gateways for us, right? Instrument data captured on NAS devices need to be sent to the cloud. And there are several ways we do it. Our legacy data is moved using Snowball, right? And our newly created data goes through our file gateways. We have also used SFTPs to move the data. We also use data sync. So there are several different AWS services that we use to move the data over direct connect. Right? Once it ends it in S3 buckets, it needs to be cataloged, indexed, right, and then analyzed using analytical tools, depending on what type of data it is. Right? Many a times for image data sets, they need to be converted. So there are double copies, raw data copies, and converted data copies. Right? So for example, radiology data is DICOM images, high content screening is very specific images. Now they need to be converted to standard TIFF or JPEG format to be analyzed and stitched together for viewing. Right? So very specific to life sciences, but not unique. Right? So how do we actually why use AWS Gateway appliance? Right? So there are three core reasons why we use the gateway appliance, right? The onboard cache is extremely important for us because it creates asynchronicity between our lab workflows and the data transfer to cloud. Very, very important, right? The gateway also does conversion from NFS to S3 automatically for us. A lot of services AWS built for us, so we don't have to do that. For example, compression of the data, encryption of the data. So we can safely move our data over the wire and keep it encrypted on S3 as well. Right? So that's the second. And the third very important thing is once the data is moved, there are some instances where we actually have on-prem applications looking at this data. So it's very important to have AWS Gateway. It serves a function. We use it in the file mode, not the volume or block mode. So getting into S3 is after the and to prepare it for downstream processing, there are many things which are essential to give a complete hybrid solution, right? With this data transfer to S3, the role of gateway is only when on-prem applications need to look at it, right? But there is a lot of processing done downstream. The business data is kept in business metadata catalogs. We use graph databases to do relationships, and depending on the type of the data, we use, for example, genomics would use ontologies to understand the data related. Image data sets need proprietary analysis tools, right? So depending on the type and domain, we use different technologies, right? And then it ends up in the data lake. That's where it is exposed to visualization tools, understanding the data, queries, and analysis of the data as well. So that looks like that's, yeah, and special to image management is the image transformation, right? Many or all of our image applications go through this process of conversion, right? Many of the radiology, histology images need to be stitched back for viewing, right? So many different serverless services we use to do that as well, right? So it is not just the gateway, but many services, AWS services that we use to provide a complete hybrid solution. So that is our journey of hybrid solution, hybrid cloud, and use of AWS Gateway Appliance today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's pretty exciting to me, and I know I'm kind of a nerd or a geek, but it's pretty exciting to me to watch how Bristol-Myers Squibb has gone from an on-prem, high-performance computing environment for what they're doing, frankly, for all of us, and have built this really effective hybrid workflow using Snowball to get large bulk data up onto AWS, and then employing Storage Gateway for their continuous workflow. So thank you, Mohammed and team, for everything that you do. Now I want to just touch upon some of the use cases for Snowball Edge before we ask Maggie to come up on stage and talk to you about how her team is using it in the field. If you're unfamiliar with Snowball Edge, a brief history, perhaps in order. Snowball started off as a bulk data migration device or bulk data migration service, and many people, perhaps folks in this room, kind of look at Snowball as being that. But over the years, we've evolved Snowball not just to do that. It still does that and does it very well, as we just saw in Mohammed's presentation. But we've evolved it to be an edge computing device. So the three things that we intend for it to do is to be amazing at collecting data in the field, amazing at being able to add value to that data, to process that data on device, whether using our Snowball Edge storage optimized or our compute optimized version, which has a GPU capability within it. And then be able to take that data and then move it up into AWS, or in the cases we'll see when Maggie comes up, the ability to make decisions on that data in the field, right? And to do all of this on services that look like are compatible with the services that you use in region. EC2 compatible compute, S3 compatible object, EBS compatible block. The building blocks by which many of you build your applications today. And as we move forward, we'll see even more of that happen on the edge. So when we look at Snowball Edge, we really do look at how are we going to bring AWS capabilities to where you need them to be, to your factory floor, to your hospital, into healthcare environments. We often talk about the tactical edge, which is really for our DoD customers. The ability to put these things on ships, in planes, on vehicles that are moving through the field, and be able to develop that software on AWS, vend it onto a Snowball, and put it into one of these environments. And these environments may be connected, they may be intermittently connected, right? Collect a tremendous amount of intelligence and data, and then be able to take that and ship it back when another one is coming in, to be able to do something really intelligent with that data, or to be able to mine that data for additional value. We also see this being used in a content production world. So, the folks in the media and entertainment space, they are a creative bunch, and they know how to really push technology to the edge. And we're going to see in a use case that's coming up right now. Netflix and what they do with the folks that produce for them. We all binge on Netflix, And we think about Netflix as a producer, but the reality is that they have a lot of folks that produce for them. And so what Netflix has done is they've built a workflow that allows them to vend snowballs to production companies. Those production companies then run, they do whatever production companies do. They, make wonderful movies that we all like. But they take that data and they load it onto a snowball. That snowball is then, shipped, because snowballs have a little e-ink label on them, and we download the address of where they're supposed to go, and then a new address gets popped in there where they need to go back to. So the data just gets loaded onto that thing. They just throw it at the UPS guy, and that just makes its way back to wherever Netflix needs it to be, so that they can do all the post-production work, turn that into content, and allow each and every one of us to eat an entire pint of gelato while we're sitting there binging on some recent show that they've done. I've never done that, but I've heard some of us have. So, this is really a data collection workflow, and it really helps because, if you have partners that you're trying to get data from, it simplifies their world, the logistics, the capability of being able to ship a snowball, ship it back without you having to be involved, and it gets to the right place, right? That really simplifies logistics. It really simplifies the workflows, right? It reduces the complexity of what you have to do. It really does reduce the risk. Prior to what Netflix was doing is they were taking a bunch of USB drives, and they were dumping content on them, and they kind of load them into a box and put some peanuts in there and ship them back, right? That's harder. It's a lot harder. So we're able to automate this. We're able to make it simpler. And Snowball Edge is not only a hardened device, but it's a highly secure device. It has physical security. It has multiple layers of logical security. So when you're putting your data on this and shipping it through UPS or FedEx or the post office, you don't have to worry about your data. You don't have to worry about the device. So I mentioned a little, a few times in this presentation about the ability to do real-time decision-making in the field. And this is really what Maggie's going to come up and talk to us about. And in this particular example, use case, you can take advantage of EC2 compatible compute. You can take advantage of EBS-compatible block storage and S3-compatible object storage. You can, if you would, build your application on the cloud, then vend it to a snowball. We often refer to this as digital twinning, where you can do a lot of your DevOps work in the cloud, and then you can bring that into the field without having to worry. And this is really what is inspiring about what Maggie's going to talk about, is that when you get into a situation where you need the stuff to work, you can't have an IT guy go rolling out into the middle of nowhere and try to get the IT equipment set up. You have to ship the box there, it needs to land, you plug it into the wall, and it just starts working. And so in this particular environment, we're really capturing all three of the capabilities that are fundamental to Snowball Edge, which is we need to collect the data, we need to run some sort of analytics on it, we need to make some decisions on the data, right? If this isn't a forward operating base, right, and you're running these devices at a forward operating base, you don't want all your data have to get all the way back to some central location for somebody to make some strategic call or tactical call so that you can do something. You want to be able to make that decision right there. Snowball Edge is used for this use case every single day. And then once the snowball is full, you ship it back, you take all of this, you put it in your data lake, and you run analytics on it to understand what happened and how we can be better next time. It's a tremendous use case. So it's faster. It's faster for dev test, it's faster for analysis, it's faster to get your results in the field. You greatly reduced the complexity. You don't have a ton of hardware. You get your storage, networking, and compute all in one ruggedized case, right? It really does reduce your setup time, and it reduces your liabilities, right? It's more mobile, it's more secure. It's a tremendous solution. So many of our AWS government and non-governmental agencies have come to us over the years, and they have asked us, how do you help us bring the power of AWS into the field? And how do you help us make these real-time decisions? Very recently, our AWS disaster response team has helped accelerate outcomes and responses to things like this year's hurricanes in the Bahamas using Snowball Edge. And both using in-cloud capabilities to be able to, if you would, scale, and the ability to use Snowball Edge on site to implement some of the capabilities. It was a really tremendous and powerful solution. So I'm super proud and excited to welcome to the stage the global leader of AWS's disaster recovery, disaster response program, to tell you about really their inspiring work. So I'd like to welcome Maggie to the stage.
Thank you, Wayne. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first reInvent, and I'm excited to be here with all of you today. So the AWS Disaster Response Program launched publicly in 2018. It's a service designed to help improve government and nonprofits' response efforts around disasters, really focusing on helping them to better prepare, respond, and focus on recovery efforts, shortening the time frame that it takes to do those things by leveraging AWS services and partner technology. So how do we do this? Why do we do this? Et cetera. So we deploy technical experts, our AWS Disaster Response Action Team, as volunteers to post-disaster scenarios that help enable customers' utilization of AWS services like the Snowball Edge for their response efforts. They provide direct, on-the-ground support to customers in these efforts. To date, we have supported more than 20 disasters, and we've leveraged more than 4,500 volunteer hours in support of our customers in their disaster and humanitarian response efforts. So preparedness and data protection is key, and we're working with our customers to establish playbooks to deploy staff and technology solutions in times of need. We're investing in the build-out and deployment of those services for disasters that have broader applicability as well. And we're also documenting these solutions to help enable other customers to deploy those solutions for their use cases. And then the program is philanthropic in nature. The program, we provide disaster response credits and other resources like our employees as experts to support organizations responding to disasters. So when do we support customers? It depends on the response level that's required. It depends on the severity of the disaster and the unique use case. How can we help support our customer working backwards from their need? So our technical experts, our DRT, what we do is we provision Snowball Edge with critical data and software stacks that will allow the customer to run workloads at the edge. DRT delivers the hardware to the customer at the disaster site and implements the infrastructure based on the customer need. To prepare for disasters, the AWS DRT conducts field simulation exercises with customers to ensure the technology works when it's needed most. We've done this in the continental US, in Peru, and also in the Caribbean. So here are some of our field simulations and exercises that we've done. So again, working backwards from the customer need. In St. Kitts, Caribbean island in the Atlantic, we worked with them on a resiliency plan. So we worked with their Department of Technology. They identified, what were critical workloads and data that they would need to access during hurricane season, should their connectivity be wiped out during a catastrophic storm or floods. And so they identified the Department of Justice and their data and workloads, and their hospital and healthcare systems were critical data and workloads that they would need the most if they lost connectivity in times of a disaster. So we worked with them to architect a solution on 2 Snowball Edge devices for those departments to use. And they have it on site from June through November for hurricane season in times, just in case a disaster strikes. In Peru, specifically, we worked with the Peruvian Air Force, We Robotics, Esri, and Drone Deploy. So in Peru, we went to along the Amazon border, where they were taking aerial imagery from a drone. And this was a field test, and so this laid the foundation for our actual use case in the Bahamas that I'll talk about later. But here, the customer wanted to be able to collect process, and analyze the aerial imagery at the edge in a low connectivity or no connectivity environment. And so they were able to do this in Peru, and like I said, that laid the foundation for other customers in additional use cases, and I'll talk about Bahamas in a second. And then recently, we collaborated with Verizon and APN partner Novetta at Verizon's Operation Convergent Response. And there, what we were able to do was to deploy their solution, Novetta's solution, Aegeon, on a Snowball Edge. And we had IoT devices. We were tracking kind of staff and their vehicles in a real disaster simulation to test and showcase the power of the Aegeon solution running on the Snowball Edge. So those field tests, also, we use those to train our DRT for future deployments post-disaster. So here with the USGS, this was the first time that we've deployed a Snowball Edge after a disaster in a disaster scenario. So in 2018, following Hawaii, their Kilauea volcano, the U.S. Geological Survey, their facility hosted about 40 years of data on-prem, and their facility was in the path of the lava. And so it was within, I think it was under 2 miles of the facility, and they reached out to us with an urgent request. They needed us to help them move that on-prem data into the cloud. So within 24 hours, we got them the Snowball Edge device. They shifted that data onto the device and into the cloud. So that's one of the use cases that Wayne talked about. That's the storage use case where we use the Snowball Edge for transfer specifically. Most recently, with help.ngo. So the mission of help.ngo is to fill the void that exists between the time of a disaster occurrence and that of the traditional response effort. They are an all-volunteer team that utilizes Special Forces small unit leadership model and responds within the first 24 to 48 hours of a disaster. Their volunteers provide medical assistance, communications access, search and rescue capabilities, and overall coordination response. Help.ngo's Disaster Immediate Response Team, or DIRT, is able to insert into a disaster or post-disaster situation with key equipment, knowledge, and thus limiting the loss of property and resources and life. So when Hurricane Durian, a Category 5 hurricane, hit the Bahamas in early September of this year, 2019, Help.ngo was engaged to fly drones and collect imagery to assist with humanitarian response efforts. Specifically, they were focusing on Grand Bahama Island, Abaco, and then the outer lying keys that were most impacted by the disasters. Everything east of, around Marsh Harbor and east on Grand Bahamas Island was impacted. They had no connectivity or limited connectivity. Abaco was wiped their connectivity, and as well as the outer keys. So the AWS Disaster Response Program and our Disaster Response Action Team volunteers, we deployed in support of Help.ngo to the Bahamas. We provided 2 Snowball Edge devices to help process aerial imagery of the damaged areas, which increased efficiency in assessing impact. The AWS Disaster Response Action Team member spent more than a week on the ground with Help.ngo, running initial imagery processing tasks and training staff in the field on deploying the Snowball Edge device with the solutions. This helped Help.ngo to rapidly streamline and distribute high-resolution images of the impact on the most affected islands. And you can see what they were able to do in the image on the right. So based on the input from Help.ngo, a Snowball Edge compute-optimized device was provisioned with image processing software. In addition, they used a laptop with file management tool to streamline imagery file transfer from drone SD cards to the S3 on the Snowball Edge, as well as a geospatial image viewer. After arriving in the Bahamas, the AWS Disaster Response Action Team member worked with help.ngo to process the imagery collected using a drone. The drone imagery was recorded in GeoTIFF format as large images with multiple layers. The drones collected nearly 100 gigabytes of geocoded imagery every few days from highly affected areas like Abaco, Marsh Harbor, and the Outer Keys. The imagery files were pulled from the drone SD cards and put onto the Snowball Edge. After transferring the images, imagery software was used to process and create a continuous map. The processing was extremely compute intensive. Some of the areas where imagery was collected was over 1,000 tiles at both medium and high resolution. The AWS DRT and help.ngo ran the drone imagery processing pipeline. The team recognized that with the compute optimized Snowball Edge, the images could be processed much faster by parallelizing the tasks. The Snowball Edge, an imagery processing pipeline, So we have documented that solution, and it's now posted on a blog. It's a more technical blog post for your reference. So in our customers' words, with the AWS Disaster Response Team and Snowball Edge, we were able to gather, understand, and distribute drone imagery faster in the Bahamas. Having AWS at the edge enables us to process data rapidly on site and quickly give mission-critical information to humanitarian decision makers. The Snowball Edge brought cloud to the edge for their efforts, allowing real-time data processing and the rapid provision of mission-critical data to humanitarian decision makers. With AWS, customers can focus on mission-critical functions and transform their overall disaster response and resiliency efforts. Services like the Snowball Edge enable customers to collect and analyze data more rapidly and respond more quickly. Thank you. Sorry.
Home stretch. So when I look at the solutions that Maggie and her team are putting together, the number of ideas that run through my head, I can barely manage them. But if you think about the amount of data that they're collecting, the situational data that they're collecting, their ability to bring that back onto in region or onto the cloud, perform simulations, understand what could be done better next time. What are the potential that we have for accelerating betterment or results in these areas? I just find it fascinating, and I'm looking forward to everything Maggie and her team will be doing over the next couple of years. So I hope that these examples demonstrated Snowball Edge and Storage Gateway family services to you and provide you with some ideas on how you can use them to build your own on-prem and edge solutions using these services. And it's been a really busy year for these teams. They've been launching and releasing new capabilities as the year goes on. And we anticipate, frankly, given where this space is going, for 2020 to be even more of a busy year for us. Now, a lot of these capabilities that we launched will be discussed in other sessions throughout the next couple of days, and I recommend that you go to those sessions to dig deep into some of these. But for instance, Snowball Edge has increased its EBS capacity to 10 terabytes on the edge. We've also enabled the ability to update the device's software over the air so that software can be upgraded in these remote locations when the device is connected. File Gateway, Volume Gateway, Tape Gateway have done a tremendous number of launches throughout the year, covering everything from higher performance, greater capacity, integrations deeper into storage services such as S3. The Tape Gateway was launched with Glacier Deep Archive on day of launch, which results in the lowest cost if you would, virtual tape storage in the market today for cloud at roughly $1 a terabyte per month, which is a tremendous, tremendous value. So these services have been working really hard, taking the input and inspiration from you all and producing these capabilities, and I expect next year to be even more interesting. These are some of the services, some of the sessions, excuse me, if you'd like to attend. Some of the ones that have already been held, we have the YouTube link there, so you can go watch them at your leisure. And when we started this, I said, I wanted you to take away some thoughts before you exited to your next session or to the rest of your day. And those are the range of edge and on-prem storage solutions we have for you, how you can use Storage Gateway in your on-prem storage challenges, how you can use Snowball to bring AWS to wherever you are, right? And I hope that the stories from Bristol-Myers Squibb and our disaster response team around how to use Gateway in hybrid environments and Snowball in disconnected edge environments was inspiring to you. So before you leave, I have 2 more minutes. I'm going to take only one. I'm going to take 1 minute. Oh, you want to do questions? I want a call to action, though. Before you guys leave Vegas, or maybe when you get home, I'd like to ask each and every one of you to think about the stuff we talked about today, whether it's a new feature that we launched, or maybe just you're familiar now with the services, and apply those services to a problem that you have. And to get back to us, and feel free to email me, it's wduso@amazon.com, and tell me about what you're doing with these services, or tell me about some of the challenges you're having using the services. I'd really like to hear back from you, because at the end of the day, that's why we're here. We're here not to talk to you, even though we stand on stage and do that. We're really here to listen to what you have to say, and I'd like that to be a continuous process throughout the year. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll stay up on stage. If you don't, I'll take questions in the room or outside the room. Thank you very much.